You're listening to episode 62 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the podcast and website for modern, secular application of early Buddhist thought. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the companion website has show notes for each episode, along with resource materials on Buddhism, critical thinking, science, secularism, and skeptical thought. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Professor Peter Harvey speaks with us about his book, An Introduction to Buddhist Ethics, Foundations, Values, and Issues. Hi everyone. In our practice of the Eightfold Path, sila, or morality, plays a large part. Our ethical words, actions, and livelihood are the outward manifestation of our internal mental processes. But even with a strong moral compass, well-developed set of critical thinking skills, and the best of intentions, we can still find ourselves faced with the most perplexing of ethical dilemmas. Buddhism is very helpful in this. The guidelines are not ambiguous, far from it, but they do have the wonderful ability to suit a wide variety of needs. It is this very flexibility which has allowed Buddhism to flourish in a variety of cultures, and the study of Buddhist ethics remains an endlessly fascinating area of study and practice. Professor Peter Harvey was born in the county of Yorkshire, UK, and has been a Theravada Buddhist since his time at Manchester University. He is co-founder with Dr. Ian Harris of the UK Association for Buddhist Studies. Professor Harvey is a meditation teacher in the Samatha Trust tradition since 1976. The Samatha Trust has its roots in Thai Theravada Buddhism and is a lay organization with around 80 teachers, mostly in the UK. It teaches a carefully structured form of mindfulness of breathing, along with a range of other meditations and Pali chanting. It explores a range of texts, sutta, abhidhamma, and a few Mahayana texts, to bring alive their relevance to contemporary practice. In July 2003, the Thai Buddhist Trust gave Professor Harvey a Golden Buddha Award for distinguished service to the advancement of Buddhism in the UK. So, sit back, relax, and have a nice Castleton spring flush. And I'm here with Dr. Peter Harvey, Professor of Buddhist Studies. Peter, thank you so much for being here.
Okay, that's very good. Yeah, good to speak to you. Mm-hmm.
Our mutual friend Chris Mitchell, who I've interviewed before on autism and his Buddhist practice, recommended that I speak with you, so that's why we are chatting with you today. And I'd like to start with asking about your background and how you, as a Westerner, came to have a Buddhist practice.
Okay, it was in the 1970s, early 70s. I was at university in Manchester doing a philosophy degree. I did a comparative religion course on the side, and so through that learnt something about Buddhism. There was also a Buddhist society run by somebody called Lance Cousins, who's a Buddhist scholar. I was quite impressed by the people who came to that and the ideas of Buddhism, and he also taught meditation, a form of samatha practice, mindfulness of breathing, which I started then and have continued with since then. I've been teaching that also since about 1978. So I'm a member of something called the Samatha Trust, which is a lay organisation in the UK. It's got about 80 teachers around the country. We have a meditation centre in Wales, and so it's a lay organisation, although we draw on teachings from selected monks who have a particular emphasis on samatha, on developing deep states of calm. And our teacher, Thai teacher, is Nai Boonman. He was a monk in Thailand. He came over in the 60s, taught a group of people in Cambridge, including Lance Cousins, and then it's kind of spread since then.
Now, it's interesting that you had a focus on samatha meditation because right now, at least in the United States, many practice centers tend to focus on vipassana, on insight meditation.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about how your focus still more so on samatha. How has vipassana entered into your practice, and how do you deal with people who are very focused on vipassana and maybe not have tried samatha?
If people want to do vipassana or mainly vipassana, that's fine. A lot of people come to me. I teach meditation. Some come, some stay, some go away. I include some vipassana in my practice and teaching, but I tend to look on vipassana as something which will arise almost as a byproduct of samatha, particularly if you're tuned into many Buddhist ideas and teachings. If you like, the wisdom aspect is part of samatha, and it can come out of it, although you can also do specifically vipassana practice as well. Samatha, our Samatha Trust tradition makes is quite interested in some of the kind of material on, well, obviously different levels of states of mind, but the corresponding cosmology. We're quite interested in that and how that might relate to actual practice and how it might inform it. So in that sense, Samatha Trust is in some ways quite traditional in the way in the kind of teachings it's interested in, although not necessarily too traditional in how we use them. Always, or relate to them, yeah.
Yeah. Now, you've written several books on Buddhist topics. The one I'd like to speak with you today is An Introduction to Buddhist Ethics, Foundations, Values, and Issues. Tell us about writing the book itself, and then if you could talk about what we mean by foundations and values and issues.
Okay. Well, it arose out of a course I taught with colleagues at the University of Sunderland. It was one course, one module, part of a degree in religious studies or religious component of degrees. It was on ethics in Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. And we taught that for many years, and I gradually accumulated various amounts of material. And then I wanted to kind of draw that together and deepen it and write this book, because I thought the Buddhist ethical tradition is incredibly rich, and I think I wanted to make that material available. Of course, well, it came out in 2000. About 1995, approximately, the Internet Journal of Buddhist Ethics had come out. And there were many books by Damien Keown, so that the whole kind of study of Buddhist ethics had gone up a notch in previous years. And so I kind of was building on that and developing that. Although I'm personally Theravada Buddhist, the Introduction to Buddhist Ethics draws on Mahayana as well, and it looks, well, foundations in terms of key ideas relating to karma, rebirth, what's usually called the Four Noble Truths, although I prefer to translate them as the Four True Realities for the Spiritually Ennobled, I think is a better translation, and key ideas like impermanence, dukkha, not self. So the kind of framework of ideas within which Buddhist ethics fit, and also, of course, the Noble Eightfold Path, and aspects of the monastic code, the Vinaya, because that actually shows you in detail how some of the principles of Buddhist ethics are worked out in relationship to things like intention, knowledge, pre-knowledge of how your action is likely to affect what you're doing, in the effect on other people and other beings, and degrees of blame that you might attach for doing an action depending on your motive and intention, things like that. So that's the kind of foundations. The values bit are key things like generosity, giving, sharing, not only material things, but sharing good karma, what's usually called merit, but I translate karmic fruitfulness for benefit of others.
I like that translation much better, yes.
Yeah, merit is incredibly limp. You know, it has some merit. Yeah,
Yeah.
it contributes to people putting down that side of Buddhism and not appreciating the positive aspects of it, although it can go too far as well. Obviously the 5 precepts and the various implications that can come out of those. Also looking at the value of celibacy for monasticism and some of the kind of social teachings of Buddhism. And then the issues looks at a range of topics, which I'll just remind myself so I don't miss any out. Also looking at Mahayana input to the tradition and the way in which it reconfigured aspects of Buddhist ethics, much more overt emphasis on compassion, which means also that sometimes it justified breaking precepts if the out of skillful means, if it brought more benefit to those involved. Then the issues, attitude and treatment of the natural world, economic ethics, war and peace, suicide and euthanasia, abortion and contraception, sexual equality, homosexuality and other forms of, quotes, queerness. So those are the issues that are dealt with in that book.
Excellent. Now I wanted to focus on a couple of the things that you had mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned very briefly intention and how that works into ethical behavior. How do you treat that in class? Because I know that's a topic that comes up a great deal with our meditations, that we set our intention before we go into meditation, and that intention is a key component of what arises as our behavior. So how do you handle that in class?
Right. In terms of actually before meditation, I wouldn't see that so much in terms of intention or cetana. Probably see it more in terms of samma sankappa, the second factor of the path, which I would usually translate right resolve. It's the kind of frame of mind with which you approach an activity that helps you then put energy into and a direction into what you're about to do.
Now, that's a very good point. I think there's a muddling of the term, and this is one of the reasons I'm greatly fond of taking a look at the Pali, is that there's an intentional distinction between these uses of what we just think of as an intention. It's like, well, no, it's a little more than that.
Right. I mean, in one sense, I compare that. If you're going on a long car journey, you make sure you know where you're going, got the map, you've got all your provisions ready, and you kind of get yourself ready, and then you go. And in fact, the word sankappa in Pali, and sankalpa in Sanskrit, was the word that in Brahmanism, before Buddhism, that was used by the priests before they did their complicated ritual. They get themselves mentally prepared and then put their resolve into what they were doing. So although the actual activities of the ritual and meditation are very different, it's just, you've got to get yourself prepared to focus. And I would see actually chanting before meditation as very much helping to contribute to that. Helps put you in a good frame of mind to benefit more from the practice. But so that's in terms of meditation. But you were also asking in terms of intention, cetana, to do with action?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, in what sort of way? You say people have problems with it, or?
Yeah, and the idea that our behavior comes from causes and conditions, and how intention plays into that.
Well, intention is itself one of the causes and conditions. The cetana, I tend to translate it as volition or will rather than intention. Intention is kind of part of that, or in the background of that. Again, it's a state of mind in which you do an action, in particular, obviously, how it's directed. Obviously, various things feed into that in terms of what's happened to you, your character tendencies, etc. But I mean, in a sense, you're raising the issue of free will.
It might have been something I was hinting at, yes.
Right. That's a big topic in itself. If anybody wants to hear what I have to say on that or read it, if you log on to the Journal of Buddhist Ethics in, I think, 2007, Internet Journal of Buddhist Ethics. I've got a long article there on the issue of freedom of the will.
And actually, for people who are listening to the podcast, I'll be linking that article.
Okay.
I did see that
Okay.
that out there.
Right.
I think it was 2007. And I'll be linking that on the web page for this interview because it is a fascinating article. And for folks who are on the Facebook page, you've probably already seen that because I've probably already linked it.
Okay, right. I mean, obviously there are various external pressures on you, but I would say the more you practice according to the Buddhist precepts, the more you practice the meditation, you are strengthening the internal qualities of character that mean that it is far more likely that you will do the right thing in future. Not always, but it helps develop the character, develop the virtues, strengthen them, so that the if you like, wholesome or skillful states of mind and tendencies are stronger within you, and therefore are more likely to have good effects. And then one of those good qualities is obviously mindfulness, which will hopefully mean that you do act in an ethical way, or at least will mean that when you don't, you are willing to fully acknowledge that and learn from the mistakes of that, rather than make excuses.
And I think that's where, for me at least, meditation seems to be very helpful in that we have a better insight, knowing that's a charged word, into what's actually going on in our minds and where things are coming from. And it's more difficult for us to shirk away from what is sometimes the hard truth of what we're doing and what we're thinking.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, I suppose what comes to mind there is the image of Manjushri in Mahayana Buddhism, who is the bodhisattva who embodies compassion. He has the sword of wisdom, which I often describe in class as cutting through bullshit. Yeah. So, yes, we must, with kindness and compassion, not put up with our own bullshit.
Yeah. That's an excellent quote. I'll be putting that out as well.
Okay.
Now, how do students respond when you start diving into the Vinaya? Because there are a lot of people in the West are a little startled by seeing their 227 formal rules for monks, even more for nuns. How do they respond to that?
Well, no, being a monk or nun is something you choose. So, I mean, if you don't want to live by all those precepts, you don't do it. But the Vinaya is not something I've studied in great detail, but I've kind of looked into the aspects which has implications for ethics and the way Buddhist ethics work, because I think that does still have implications, some of the general principles for lay ethics. Many of the monastic rules are, if you like, detailed embodiments of aspects of lay ethics as well, although obviously ones to do with celibacy go beyond lay ethics. I tend to explain the precepts in general as a set of, and often Western monks talk of them like this, as a set of aids to mindfulness, that when your behaviour comes up against a rule, potentially breaking it, or maybe has broken a minor one, it means you have to give attention to what you're doing and why you're doing it, and to reflect back on where that behaviour is coming from. So in that sense, the monastic rules are they are literally sikkhapadang, rules of training, as are in fact the lay precepts as well. So they are intended to help shape behaviour in a skillful way and prompt mindful reflection on behaviour and where it's coming from.
Now tell us also, you'd mentioned other topics, and two that are a bit charged in our society. One is particularly timely, that of gender equality, with issues with a certain community trying to stop the ordination of nuns, and many of us are, of course, why not? There's no reason not to.
Yeah.
How do you treat that topic in your class?
Right. Are you talking particularly about the ordination of women, or more generally, or what?
It's just gender equality, in general.
Okay. I think if you look in the range of Buddhist texts, you can find aspects which are very strong on gender equality, and ones which are less strong. And then if you look at some of the practice of some Asian Buddhist cultures, you can see less strong and also some strong aspects. It's inevitably 2,500 years, odd years of a complex tradition. You have a whole range of aspects. But if you pick out the important thing, well, for me the important things, it's very clearly emphasized in the early Buddhist texts, Pali texts, for example, that gender is kind of irrelevant to issues of enlightenment. In terms of ethics, men and women are equally capable of good and bad actions, and the Buddhist precepts apply equally to them. In terms of the ordination of women as nuns, that started within the Buddha's lifetime. There is reflection in the text that a suggestion that the Buddha hesitated. There are scholars who say, well, that passage, if we look at different versions of it, perhaps it's a slightly later development. It may be the product, the texts, as we have them now, of debate in the early Buddhist tradition about the appropriateness of the ordination of women. If one takes the text as it stands, with the Buddha hesitating, the way I would read that was that the hesitation was not whether women should be ordained, but that he was concerned about doing that, or the repercussions of doing that in a society an existing society which was certainly not gender equal. He wanted to ensure that the female order was well respected, and that's why, if he did, he made it in certain ways dependent on the male monastic order, so that it could help it become independent of lay society. As I say, there's scholarly debate about the details of how the female order developed. Anyway, it's carried on completely in the East Asian tradition, the Chinese, Korean, Taiwanese, for example. It was never fully introduced into Tibet. So though there are nuns there at the level of novice ordination in Tibet, although having said that, many of the monks in Tibet are too, in the Theravada tradition, it did exist for a number of centuries, was very successful at a certain time, and then died out about the 11th century in Sri Lanka, and it was never reintroduced. It never got to Thailand, for example, probably got to Burma. So the issue is, certainly for Theravada, it's not so much the issue of the ordination of women as the revival of the ordination of women. And of course, many steps have been progressed in recent decade on that, starting in America in about 1996, then in India, then in Sri Lanka. The last report that I read on the bhikkhunis, full nuns in Sri Lanka, there were about something like 700 of them. And it's starting to spread to Thailand, which there is more resistance there because they've never had full bhikkhunis, but it's starting to take off there as well, and no doubt will spread to Burma. So in the last 10, 20 years, there's been great strides in that, and I fully support that and hope it goes well. I know there's been some controversy in the last year or so with Venerable Brahmavamso in Australia. He's part of the forest tradition of Achan Chah, and he ordained some bhikkhunis without having first got the agreement of the rest of that Western-related Sangha. So I don't know how that's going to go, but
that's the thing. We're kind of all watching that, and I've posted several articles about that particular topic because there is great support for the idea that if women want to join the monastic community, this really, it's 2011. There's no excuse for us to have such gender bias.
Right. Well, of course, in Buddhist terms, the longer time goes on, the Dharma is said to decline. Mm-hmm. So, but but I see actually the reinstitution of the order of the ordination of women is part of the move to preserve the Dharma. Yeah,
I totally agree.
From further decline. Yes.
Yep. Now, another topic that you brought up, and I've had sometimes challenging conversations with monastics about this, is the I won't say practice, but the events of euthanasia
Right.
I've found that there are a couple of suttas in the connected discourses, I think is where I found them, where there are monks who killed themselves. I think the phrase was they took the knife.
Right, okay.
And these were ones where the Buddha had visited them and that same day. And if we look at the traditional view of, Buddha being able to see people's intention, well, that he probably would have known this and yet didn't do anything to stop these events. And
right.
How do you treat that topic in class?
Right. There are three monks in this situation. I think Wakali, Channa, and can't remember the third one. Anyway, so sometimes it's the Buddha who's talked to them before, or sometimes senior monks. They all try to dissuade them. They all try to ensure, is there anything we can do for you? Do you need any medicine? But at the end of the day, they leave it up to them. They do not try to physically stop them. So in that sense, they respect their autonomy. There is considerable debate as to what the spiritual level of these people were. The Theravada commentaries say that they were not enlightened when they killed themselves, though they had the presence of mind while dying to attain enlightenment. Because it was a sermon on impermanence, etc. I read an article by Venerable Analayo recently looking at Chinese parallel to this text, which suggests that they perhaps, or one of them maybe was enlightened. So there's some debate as to, precisely what was going on there. But in terms of generally on the issue of euthanasia, I take more note, I think, of things said in the Vinaya, where it's very clear that if you assist somebody to kill themselves, or even say, given your situation, suicide would be the best way, that is actually an incredibly serious offence. It's treated the same as if you kill somebody yourself. You're out. It's a parajika offence. So clearly, that was seen as a very kind of serious thing. I also emphasize things like the idea of precious human rebirth. Human rebirth is in Buddhism seen as rare, has great potential in it. You don't know how you're going to be reborn next time. It's even said that if you live a good life, it may be that the next rebirth is a bad one, because some bad karma from an earlier life may catch up next before your good karma catches up with you. So I think all the emphasis in Buddhism would be that you get the most spiritually, morally, practice-wise out of your existing human life and don't throw it away. So that's, from my point of view, I don't think euthanasia is acceptable from Buddhist principles, either active or passive. There are actions which some people call euthanasia, but which I wouldn't, which might be acceptable, like if you're definitely going to die soon, the medical procedures are actually not going to help. They maybe just let you live a few more days, but in the midst of kind of technological medical frenzy, at a certain time you might say, enough, I don't want any more treatment.
Yeah,
that's something you choose.
Yeah,
that's right. So I wouldn't see that as euthanasia. Similarly, when doctors, the doctrine of double effect, when doctors are given increasing doses of painkiller, where they know it might have the side effect of killing the patient, but their intention, come back to that, is not to kill, but to assuage the pain, then I think that would be acceptable as well. But if the doctor is doing it, if the doctor is killing the person to end the pain, that would not be acceptable. If they're trying to kill the pain and as a side effect it might kill the person, that would be, if there are good reasons for that, that would be acceptable.
There are always so many deep shades of interpretation, and that's one of the things I always admire about Buddhist practice is that it's not a set rule that fits every single circumstances. You need to look at the comprehensive situation.
Right, yes. I think the issue there is, in a sense, there are fairly clear guidance on particular actions, but then it's what do you mean by a particular action? And I would say a particular form of behaviour done in a certain state of mind with certain knowledge, that's the piece of behaviour you can talk about.
Right.
So you have to be reasonably specific and get the feel of the context of it. Yeah.
Now, you've been teaching a program at the University of Sunderland on Buddhist studies, and that program is drawing to a close this year.
That's right, yeah. It's an online MA Buddhist Studies, yeah. It's been going since 2002, yeah.
And that will be taken over, a new course through University of Wales, is that correct?
That's right, yeah. The University of Wales at Newport will be taking over, and I think the idea is that many of the teachers will be from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, but there may be other teachers as well. As it's an online course, basically anybody from anywhere in the world can participate in teaching it, just as they can participate on the actual course as students.
Excellent. And I see Dr. Nick Swan will be taking that over. I'll be putting links to this information online for people who are listening to the episode.
Okay. I mean, if anybody wants to look at the kind of nature of the course, they just put MA Buddhist Studies into Google. It's more, I think it's at the top. It'll be the first one that comes up. Excellent. We'll do that. Professor Peter Harvey, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time today. Okay. Nice to speak to you. Right. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the companion website at www.thesecularbuddhist.com, and you'll find an entire web page devoted to this and every episode. There are also links to discussions about today's topic on the Secular Buddhist Facebook fan page. The music for the Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizan Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are linked on the Secular Buddhist on the About Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on the Secular Buddhist.